Hello and welcome back to What's Millie Making, where I'm Millie, and this is the space where I talk about the past, present, and future of my making, mostly knitting. And today's video is all about vintage Intarsia floral sweaters because I want to knit one of them for Rhinebeck this year. Last year when I made a similar video talking about different vintage patterns, I just had a wide variety of patterns and all different sorts of color palettes with all different sorts of inspiration. And this year I have a much more targeted focus. And that is, I'm just repeating myself now, vintage Intarsia floral patterns. Now, if you're not familiar with all things like colorwork knitting, maybe you don't know what Intarsia is. Intarsia is a specific knitting technique. You can do it with hand knitting, you can do it with machine knitting, where you can make color work in, trying to think of the best word. I would say it's a cluster, it's a patch. So in traditional stranded color work, you are carrying that yarn from the beginning of the row to the end of the row, be it flat or in the round. Whereas in Intarsia, each color of yarn that you're using, it can start and stop in the middle of the row. So it's not creating a double layer of fabric in the same way that stranded knitting is. And one upside of that is you are not creating a very bulky garment. You can create motifs where you don't have to worry about having very long floats. One downside, depending on your point of view and your knitting preferences, are that you cannot knit Intarsia in the round. I think I've seen like some YouTube videos like hacks, but it's not truly in the round. And as somebody who is pretty inexperienced with Intarsia, I will not be trying any of those hacks at this time. I have seen it in some modern patterns, but I think it's much more prevalent in vintage patterns from the 80s and 90s. And if you're gonna come from me saying like, oh my god, I can't believe that era is considered vintage now, technically anything older than 20 years old is vintage. So yes, I am vintage as well. Now, side note, if you just want to see the patterns, there are chapters in the video and you can just skip ahead to that. But I'm gonna talk a little bit more about the inspiration I found for deciding like color palettes and silhouettes and all that stuff. And I'll also talk a little bit more about the designer whose patterns I want to follow. So earlier this year, on one of my many Ravelry deep dives where I just like looking at random things on Ravelry, maybe I find somebody's, maybe I'm looking up a yarn and then I look up a project and then I'm like, oh, this design is really cool. Let me look at the pattern. And then I look at the designer and then I look at their back catalog of work. And then I find another project that somebody else made from that designer. And then I look at all of their projects and then I find another pattern and another designer. And it's just like, it's a rabbit hole. It just keeps going and going. And through that, I discovered a designer who was very prolific during the 80s, and that is Susan Duckworth. I was immediately entranced by her work. She makes so many Intarsia patterns. A lot of her patterns also incorporate cables, and I ultimately ended up purchasing 2 of her books. Her books are no longer in print, but you can find them very easily on the secondhand market. So I purchased, I believe this was her first book, Susan Duckworth Knitting, and then I also purchased Floral Knitting. And even if you are not a knitter, but even if you are a knitter and you don't have any desire to work up these patterns, or it's just not a skill you're interested in learning, I think they're really cool coffee table books, just like for inspiration. The photography in these books are so cool, especially the first one, Susan Duckworth's Knitting. It's very like hazy and dreamy and 80s. I'm gonna try to find I'll insert like B-roll footage of some of the photography that I really, really love. It reminds me of the like I Spy books from my childhood, that photography style. I feel like it also had a resurgence within the past 10 years. Like people add like Vaseline to their camera lenses to bring the haziness, and I'm really losing the plot at this point. What was I saying? Oh yeah, so Susan Duckworth, I'm just like really, really inspired by all her designs. And honestly, if you have watched my previous vintage knitting patterns, or if you've just watched my channel, you may know that I really love looking at vintage Rowan designs. So initially for this video, I was going to pull some designs from this book, and I was just looking at the Rowan back catalog, and they have so many cool floral Intarsia patterns as well. And there are some other designers like Annabelle Fox, Kay Fassett, Kim Hargraves. There's others who were also prolific during the same time period, and they each have their own unique aesthetic, but they also all incorporate Intarsia into a lot of their work, and they all also have floral Intarsia designs. But just to make things more streamlined, I decided to focus on Susan Duckworth's knitting because she's really the one who inspired me into this like category of patterns this year. So it's her patterns I will be talking about in this video, and one of her patterns I would ultimately love to make for Rhinebeck. Now, without a doubt, I think there are plenty of people who could wear one of these sweaters in the year 2025 exactly as written and look super duper cool. And I just know I'm not one of these people. Like, if I was wearing this whole look, like, I'm sure there are people who could pull it off. I just can't. So I think the easiest way to modernize these patterns are to adjust the silhouette and the color palette. For instance, a lot of them have like a tunic-like length. Some of them have these like puffy shawl colors. Some of them have like these very, very bright neon color palettes. And that's not to say that any of those design choices are bad or automatically going to make you look outdated. And like, even if they do, who cares? Like, wear what you like. It's more that I don't want the sweater to be an exact replica of something made in the 80s. I want it to be like, this is going to be like the Bridgerton of sweaters. I want it to be inspired by the era and just have like the vibes of that era, but I want it to be a 2025 version of that, if you catch my drift. Hopefully I'm making sense. So before I tackle a complicated colorwork project like this, I like to create a little mood board for both my color palette and what just kind of the vibe I want the final piece to have. So of course I headed over to Pinterest, and there are a lot of cool floral sweaters, but in particular I randomly had an interest in looking at like old runway shows and knitwear on old runway shows, and there's a lot of inspiration there. But there was this one specific collection, and then also two sweaters from this other collection, but there's this one specific collection from Kenzo. I want to say it's their fall winter 2006. So not exactly up and coming. It's 1 year off of being vintage itself. But this collection is so, so cool. And it has a lot of floral knitwear with these huge design, like huge motifs. And honestly, like this sweater on the cover has huge motifs as well, but I think because of like the styling and just the shape of it, maybe it feels more dated, whereas these Kenzo pieces, even though they are 20 years old, something about them feels like they would fit in directly into 2025. Like, if I saw somebody wearing one of their pieces on the street, I wouldn't think, oh, like that's a really cool vintage piece. I'd be like, no, that's just like a really cool sweater, full stop. So that is honestly one of the biggest inspirations for the sweater. And there is a pink sweater set and a green sweater set, and I really, really liked both of those color combinations. In addition to the existing knitwear that's already out in the world inspiring me, I also really like to look at art for inspiration, especially with a project like this where there's just so many different colors involved. And I think like a floral still life has just been something a painter can paint in any year. Like, it's just a common thing that artists enjoy because it's just beautiful to look at. Why would you not want to admire, like when you get your first camera, you take a picture of a pretty flower. Even now, when I have my iPhone with me and I see a pretty flower, I'm gonna take a picture of it. The inspiration for florals are endless. That's what was it from Devil Wears Prada? Florals for spring, groundbreaking. I just love florals. All that said, so instead of trying to look at every painting of a flower, photo of a flower ever made by woman or man or person, I picked a certain era. And during the Dutch Renaissance, I feel like they had a lot of cool moody floral paintings where there's a darker background and then it looks like there's like a light shining on the florals in the foreground, and the background is never flat. It has like some dimension to it, which I really love in a painting. As you can tell from my lack of proper vocabulary, I really don't know anything about painting, but I really just admire these paintings from an amateurish point of view. Combined with that Kenzo collection and this, I have decided I would like to do a darker background. I haven't decided if I want to do a gray or like a mossy green, and then in the foreground I want the whatever motif I use to be like lighter, brighter, punchier colors. And that was a lot of preamble. That was a lot of waffling on and on and on. I don't know how much of this will actually end up into the video. But without further ado, let's talk about the 6, 7, 5, 8, vintage Intarsia floral designs that I am considering for Rhinebeck. Let's start off with Susan Duckworth Knitting because this is the first published book. And first of all, it has the best photography that I was talking about earlier. And it also had a little bio on Susan Duckworth. Apparently, she studied painting in school and then she went to work for the BBC as a makeup artist before turning to knitting. And she created like knitwear, ready to wear garments for like some of the big London fashion brands, which is cool. So the first design that I'm considering is Wild Roses. I instantly fell in love with this pattern when I first opened up this book, specifically the gray version. Oh my God, it looks so cool. And I feel like on Reddit, I see a lot of people saying like, oh my God, mohair, it's so like 80s, it's so 70s, blah, blah, blah. Honestly, I haven't seen a lot of mohair in the vintage patterns that I have looked at, like the vintage knitwear photos that I've looked at. I'm not denying that that is a fact. I'm just saying from my limited experience, I haven't seen it until this book, and I freaking love it. I think the mohair in this sweater gives it a really dreamy look. With the return of pedal pushers, is it pedal pushers or pedal pushers? I don't know. You will never catch me wearing those pants, but they look chic on other people. I feel like this outfit looks like it could fit in the modern day. And honestly, if I pick this pattern, I will probably end up picking a very similar color palette. I can't even pick which one I like better, the black version or the gray version. I do think if I did the gray version, it would be closer to the gray version, but then have brighter colored flowers similar to the black version. As for the silhouette of this one, I don't think I would have to adjust it because it has like a really cool boxy finish, boxy shape, and it's like the perfect length. There's really not much modifying I would do to this pattern. Maybe I wouldn't do a turtleneck. Another thing I really like about this book is that a lot of the sweaters are available as both pullovers and as cardigans. And as the weather in the Northeast in October is kind of unreliable, I think I will be aiming to knit a cardigan because you just never know how hot it's going to be. So that is the Wild Roses sweater. Also, I should mention that I don't really plan on following like the gauge on any of these sweaters because they all have quite a tight gauge and that a lot of them are only available in one size. So I will just be doing a gauge that fits me. And because most of these sweaters are knit flat with like not a lot of shaping, it's quite easy to adjust for like whatever stitch count I would like. Okay, so that's sweater number 1, Wild Roses. Sweater number 2 is Pansies. Oh my God. This one and the styling of this one definitely does look more 80s. This one is a cardigan. It has this like pretty cabled sleeve detail. And then the back on this one is just epic. The colors that they chose for this, the bright sky blue background with these pansies that almost look like they're raining down the back of the sweater. Stunning, beautiful. I love it. And then there's also a darker version, which is more in line with my, dark, moody Dutch Renaissance floral still life color palette. And it is beautiful as well. And I really like the cabling detail on the collar. It is like, it's not a full-on polo collar. It's like a smaller polo collar. And then there's cables all around it. I've never seen a collar like that before I purchased this book. So that is pattern number 2. And then pattern number 3 isn't strictly floral. It's not really floral at all, but I had to include it because I really, really love the shape of this sweater. And I think the model looks really super duper cool and preppy. So this is the Fruits sweater and it has blackberries and raspberries and a bunch of different leaves on it. It has like a puff stitch and I hate knitting puff stitches. So I don't know if I would do the sort of puff stitch, but I like how this sweater has that kind of I feel like Miu Miu had a sweater like this in recent years because I saw somebody on Ravelry also made a Miu Miu inspired sweater pattern. On top, it's like very wide with the batwing sleeves, and then you have like a very tight waist, and it's kind of like baggy. And this sweater definitely has that same view, and then it also has a color. I don't know why I keep trying to show you in the book because I'm literally going to be inserting the picture on the screen. And it also has like a similar silhouette, tight at the bottom and then baggy up top. I'm unsure if I would like that fit on me, but maybe in a cardigan I would. But yeah, this sweater pattern also looks really cool. And if you did decide to do the textured stitches, I think it gives it like that extra vintagey look. And then the last sweater pattern from this book I wanted to chat about is the Plum Blossom sweater. Why do I keep holding up the book? This one also fits that moody aesthetic, especially like the model's hair is so 80s and like she's totally like smizing. Is that the word? Blue stealing? I don't know what the like current terminology for this look is. Mugging for the camera. She looks cool. The sweater looks cool. I like that I can envision it with a dark gray background because it's very, very similar to what the sample was in. Another interesting thing I found from a lot of these vintage sweater pattern books. This one is knit in wool, but I've noticed like some of the other vintage Rowan patterns, they knit a lot of Intarsia and cotton. That does not sound fun. That sounds like it would stretch out, but that is their choice. I wasn't gonna include this one, but now that I'm looking at it, I really, really like the cuff details, and it is the apple branch sweater. So the motif on this one, I'm not gonna lie, it's not my favorite. It kind of looks like a bunch of birds' heads put together. Oh my god, wait. The black one looks so different than the white one. Anyways, this is the apple branch. I will insert a picture of both the black version and the white version. On the black version, the motif kind of looks like a bunch of bird heads put together, but I think this detail that they have around the cuffs and the ribbing is so, so cool. What is this called? Okay, there's like a special stitch that you do to do that. Twist to left with yarns and be as follows. Miss one stitch on left hand needle and knit through the back loop second stitch with yarn A, then knit first stitch with yarn B, slipping both stitches off needle at the same time. That might be something cool to incorporate into my project because I know I'm not going to end up picking this design, but just that stitch pattern is really cool. Okay, so those are the 4.5 patterns from Susan Duckworth's knitting. I also have a few patterns to chat about from Floral Knitting by Susan Duckworth. Pattern number 1 is Indian weave, and it doesn't have the clearest pattern photos, but this one is really, really cool. This one is a cardigan. It is quite long, so I would definitely shorten it. And one thing I liked about a lot of the patterns in this book is they gave a sort of patchworky vibe. So this one, you combine this floral motif. It's like a checkerboard pattern with the flowers on top, and that's kind of like one panel. And then there's this like chevron panel that you alternate it with, and then the sleeves have the floral panel like continuing from the chest down the top of the sleeves, and then the bottom half of the sleeves is knit plain. It has this picot collar that looks cool, but I would absolutely not knit. But I think all part of the reason I was also really into this sweater pattern is I really like the color palette that they chose. There's also a second vest version, but I don't really love the collar on that one either. So if I were to knit this pattern, I don't think I would pick either of the collar designs. And oh, I just noticed that there's cables in the bottom. There's cables in the bottom of the ribbing on the vest. There are a lot of colorwork charts for this one because there's like a lot of different mixed motifs, so it might be a little bit difficult. Okay, the next pattern is the pattern on the book. This is also quite a difficult pattern and not one I could probably feasibly finish in time for Rhinebeck, but I had to talk about it because it's the whole reason I wanted the book, because I love the way it looks, and it's the pattern Tartan Flower. The pattern and coloring of a Buchanan tartan is a background to large stylized flowers. It's interesting how the fresh, clean, flat color of the flowers make them appear to float above the woven fabric. The jacket has a shawl collar, and the waistcoat, which can be worn by men or women, is similarly long and loose. So I think the shawl collar is really cool, and I like how there's like flowers. It looks like it's almost like embedded into the shawl collar and the button band, but I would absolutely not be knitting that. I honestly love the color palette as is. Like, I wouldn't want to change anything if I knit this sweater. Another thing that I think looks really cool is the underarm of the sweater almost looks like it has a gusset. That is not a shape that I really see. It also has a pocket. I don't think it's feasible for me to make this for Rhinebeck, but I just had to include it in the video because I think it is quite possibly my favorite Susan Duckworth pattern, maybe my second favorite. My favorite will be the next one, I think. Actually, I lied. In between, there's one that is not my favorite, but I have to talk about it because I really like the styling of it. Where did it go? Where did it go? Ha ha ha, I found it. Okay. I don't really have any desire to knit this pattern. It is the Floral Vases pattern. This theme of pots, vases, or baskets filled with flowers is one I've returned to from time to time, and it continues to intrigue me. That's great for you. Not for me, but I love the outfit. And if you watched my last, late summer knitting plans video, maybe this is reminiscent of the Laufey outfit that I talked about. When I saw that Laufey outfit, I was like, yes, I need that outfit. I love the whole thing. This is my inspiration for my Rhinebeck sweater. And this was like the original. I saw this picture even before that picture, and that I think was the impetus for me to purchase the book. So I was like, I'm obsessed with this outfit. I want to see what else is in the book. And she's just wearing a knit Intarsia sweater with a little pleated skirt and matching tights, and she's dancing around in the leaves. Like, that is my ideal Rhinebeck experience. Yeah, I just had to talk about it, even though I don't want to knit that pattern. Okay. The next pattern is, I think, my number one pick out of all the Susan Duckworth patterns, and it is patchwork. The simple cropped cardigan is worked in warm earthy colors in a checker design of double moss stitch squares and lots of small multicolored flowers. The version here shown is knitted in wool, but it would look equally good in cotton or silk yarns. And again, like, the photos in this totally look like it could be some girl getting her hipster on in 2025. I really, really like the checkerboardy design. I probably skipped the moss stitch because I don't really enjoy knitting moss stitch, and I think combining it with Intarsia just seems nightmarish. And similar to the Orkney sweater that I knit last year, which I modified to have this design aspect, but I like when the sweater has one thing going on and then the sleeve has another thing going on. I feel like sometimes when I reach the end of a sweater and I'm knitting colorwork, I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore by the time I get to the sleeves. And when you have a different motif going on in the sleeves, it feels like, oh, I'm knitting something new. I'm knitting something fresh. I'm not knitting the same thing that I have been knitting for 12 inches with like 400 stitches on the needle, you know? And I think because this one is already cropped, it's easier for me to visualize what it would look like if I were to wear this. So this is a very strong contender. I think it would really look cool if the main color was gray or that green I was talking about. However, you know that I love my dark chocolate brown. I feel like this could also look cool with a dark chocolate. Something for me to consider. My little bookmark. Okay, and then I have one last pattern in this book, and it's technically a children's pattern, but I think it would be pretty easy to size up because, like I said, there's not really a lot of shaping involved in these sweaters. They are essentially like two rectangles with maybe just like a few stitches cast off for the armhole shaping, but yeah, very easy to modify. And that is the flower tiles sweater. And I think this similar design was incorporated into the Indian weave sweater, which I talked about earlier. However, this is just patchwork all over. But then you have these flowers on top of the patchwork, and then in the corner, there's just like a little like square connecting the different tiles. And this blue one that I'm sure I've inserted on the screen is like the cover photo, and I think like the baby looks so cute. But my favorite version is this yellow and pink version. There's a pink and red version, but my favorite is the yellow, pink, and purple version. Like, the color palette is just chef's kiss. I could even make that matching bonnet. The bonnet will look terrible on me, but it would be a vibe. The reason I think I like this pattern is, I'm not going to say it's easy because there's still a lot of color changes happening per row, especially because this is a baby. There's not as many squares per row, but obviously on an adult size sweater, there would be much more colors. I do think though, this has a 25 stitch gauge. So if I were to bump it up to a like 20 stitch gauge, 19 stitch gauge, 18 stitch gauge, I could probably get away with also using not the same size squares, but I wouldn't have to knit as many small squares. So I wouldn't have to do as many color changes or bobbins per row. And that's a wrap. Apologies if this video was kind of chaotic. I just have really been enjoying her work this year and I just wanted to chat about it. So those are all the patterns that I am interested in. Obviously not all of them. I will be picking one and knitting it for Rhinebeck. If you are me, which one would you pick? Which one is your favorite out of all of these sweaters? And what do you think of a color palette? I think ultimately my color palette will really depend on the final sweater that I pick, because I know I said I wanted like a dark and moody color palette, but some of the sweaters that are just knit with a cream, they look really good. And I would be tempted to do a similar color palette. You made it all the way here through all my rambling. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I would love to know what you are working on while watching this video. If you are attending Rhinebeck or your own local sheep and wool and fiber festival this fall, are you making anything special for it? I would also love to know what you're making. Are you making the Andrea Mari sweater? Are you making your own design? Are you picking a favorite sweater from the past? Are you re-wearing your favorite sweater that you made in a previous year? I just want to know. I love talking knit. If you enjoyed this video, please do feel free to give it a like and follow along for the next one. The next one will probably be a knitting podcast. That's all I got to say for today. Thanks again for watching. Happy knitting and hope to see you again next time. Bye.